This stress-free moment's brought to you by Lewis Jewelers. Thank you to all the frontline and essential workers that have made it possible for Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor to open again.
Welcome to the Wolverine.com podcast. This is the Maize and Blue Breakdown. I'm Clayton Sayfie with Austin Fox. We're going to get into what we learned this week from talking to some Michigan football players on some Zoom press conferences. We'll talk about Jalen Mayfield heading to the NFL draft. We'll talk about the hashtag We Want to Play petition, Michigan parents getting involved. We'll do that in just a second. Remember to head to thewolverine.com. If you're not signed up already for our premium content, you can use promo code BLUE60 for 60 days for free. You get all the premium stories, insider notes on Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting. We'll also talk about new Michigan basketball commit Frankie Collins. I talked to his coach last night, and he had some great things to say. I have a story up on that at thewolverine.com. So use promo code BLUE60 for 60 days for free. But Austin, man, it's been over a week just about since the Big Ten canceled fall sports and quote unquote is exploring a spring option. What have you been doing?
Well, I actually went up north this past weekend and got away from this whole virus and Big Ten cancellation debacle. So it was
no virus up there?
No, there was no virus talk whatsoever. So it was good to get away from all that. It was good to get out on a lake, got a chance to do some boating, jet skiing, and played pickleball for a little bit. For anyone who's not familiar with it, it's an awesome game, kind of like a smaller version of tennis, and it's a heck of a workout. So again, it was really good to get away from all this drama that we've been dealing with these past few weeks and just get out on the water and have some fun.
Yep, that's awesome. I've been working on my golf game still, just trying to take my mind off of the fact that we won't have college football, at least in the Big Ten, Pac-12. Looks like the other conferences are going to go ahead and try playing. I mean, they continue to have meetings with their own presidents and their athletic directors, and they've continued to say that they're moving ahead with the fall football season. So it's great to see from a football standpoint that, you know, they understand how important football is, and they're going to continue to do what they can to have a season. But, man, over the last week, and it feels like it's been longer than a week. It's been about 9 days, so it has been longer than a week. But a star has been born in the last week. Sir Yacht, at Sir Yacht on Twitter, he is reporting that he has a source that the Big Ten is going to reverse its decision, and we are going to have football in the fall. He's just a random guy with a podcast, which I guess you could say about us. But, he's saying that Kevin Warren's statement even last night, Wednesday night, was a smokescreen, that we're going to continue to have it. And I know he's not credible at all, and he's just trying to get the attention, but there's like a 0.001% chance, or like a 0.01% chance that, I'm willing to believe it, I guess, a little bit, just since I want to. Austin, what do you think about Sir Yacht and what's been going on here over the past week with him? He's really gained some fame here.
He has. If you look at his Twitter account, he's got over 25,000 followers. So I don't think it's fair to call him a complete nobody, but I would say there is no chance of having a Big Ten season this fall, like he's kind of insinuating. I think you got pretty excited when we talked about him prior to this podcast. But with that being said, I think Kevin Warren's letter yesterday that he sent out reconfirming that there will be no Big Ten football was the end of it. I did think that there was a small possibility over these past 5 days or so that it could be reconsidered when all these Big Ten athletes and parents especially were coming out and speaking out against the Big Ten and against Kevin Warren the way they were, especially with Justin Fields' petition, Ohio State's junior quarterback, that got, I believe, over 280,000 signatures. But again, Warren shot everything down yesterday and basically caused all our hopes to come crashing down once again. And if you look at the letter that Kevin Warren sent out yesterday, it's really a bunch of nothing and a bunch of fluff, which is exactly what we've come to expect from him. John Jansen, the former Michigan offensive line captain of the 1997 national title team, retweeted Tom Mars, the famous lawyer who got Shea Patterson eligible right away at Michigan in 2018 and has worked on several other cases. Tom Mars sent the Big Ten a FOIA request, and he's going after them hard to get the reasons and to get the quote-unquote facts that Kevin Warren and the Big Ten used to cancel the season. And honestly, I don't think that they have any information or facts that is concrete evidence that they used to cancel the season. So that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on here moving forward with what becomes of this with Mars and his FOIA request. And I think that we're going to see over these next few weeks the Big Ten and Kevin Warren look even stupider, if that's possible, over these next few weeks if more information does come out about it.
Yeah, nothing will really come of it. I mean, in terms of reversing course, they're not going to reverse course because of a lawsuit or a FOIA request, but it will expose some people. And Tom Mars was saying on Sirius XM with John Jansen the other day that whether or not the Big Ten knows it and whether or not these member institutions know it, that there's going to be text messages that are going to be revealed. There's going to be emails. A lot of the medical quote unquote data that they've used to be that reasoning behind the decision is going to come out. And you have these public institutions, 13 of the 14 Big Ten schools are public. So things are going to come out. It's not going to, reverse anything. It's not going to change the decision because at the end of the day, it is the Big Ten's decision. It was Kevin Warren and the Big Ten's decision to put it to a vote, apparently, for the presidents, even though Minnesota's president said he wasn't aware there was a vote. So there's been even mixed things about that, mixed reports about whether or not there was a vote. It's not going to reverse anything, but like you said, it's going to make them look bad if some things come out where there's a president saying, I don't care about football or this or that. Something could really come out and change the whole PR aspect of this thing, but it's not going to change. They're looking at the spring, possibly to play. And I do want to talk about a spring season because I don't know what exactly is going to be quote unquote safer in the spring for these kids to play and for teams to be traveling around and things of that nature. But I think the chances of it happening are a little bit higher than most people just because of that public backlash we've seen after the cancellation. And, based on some reports that are coming out, Sandy Barber, the Penn State athletic director, said that a schedule could be released within a week or so. She said that this week. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel has said that the Big Ten's looking to start as soon as January with an 8-game schedule. So there is planning in the works. Now, I know sometimes they do their planning and then throw it out 4, 5, 6 days later. So even a plan doesn't mean anything's going to happen. But I think they're looking at it more seriously than a lot of people thought right at the beginning when they said they'd explore the option. I still don't think we're going to see it. I think it's tough to pull off with having 2 seasons in 1 calendar year. But it's encouraging to me for someone who wants more football than less that at least they're going to try something maybe and that there are talks of the Big Ten planning behind the scenes. And again, I don't have much confidence in this conference anymore, but some of the Michigan guys yesterday, when we talked to them in some Zoom press conferences, they said they'd be open to the spring, especially Carlo Kemp. Nick Eubanks was a little more up in the air, saying he's just going to hang around for a couple months and see what happens and make decisions down the road, which I think is a fair thing as well, especially for a guy who's a 5th-year senior. But Carlo Kemp's like, man, I'm focused on the spring. Your thoughts on the spring season, the latest regarding that, and then, whether or not it's really feasible, especially after listening to some of those Michigan guys yesterday say they're open to it.
When the Big Ten first announced that they would explore the idea of a spring season, I didn't think that there was any chance that it would happen, and I still think the percentage is pretty low that it will occur this spring. But I'm kind of with you in moving my percentage up on it, and I think it's at least a possibility now. I think that if you started it in late February or early March and had it go through mid-May or late May, I think that you could fit in an 8-game schedule. And I think from a physical standpoint, if you take a 3-month break, I think it would be possible for these athletes to then start fall camp again around September 1st or so, and then start the normal 2021 college football season around October 1st, give or take a few days. Nick Eubanks was asked that specific question yesterday on that Zoom press conference, and he said physically it would absolutely be doable. He said we're young as kids. We're 20, 21, 22 years old, and we recover quickly. And I think he's spot on when he says that. I actually got the vibe from listening to both him and Carlo Kemp that both guys are quite interested in potentially playing this spring, and that surprised me a little bit. I think both guys are dedicated to Michigan, and they absolutely love Michigan and love being here. That was evident with Carlo Kemp last year when he was voted a captain. And I think that if there is a spring season in these upcoming months in February and March and April, I think we'll see both guys play. I think a lot of guys on this Michigan football team would opt out, especially a lot of the veterans. But if it were to occur, and I think that I would put it around a 10 to 20% chance right now that it occurs. And I think that Nick Eubanks and Carlo Kemp are two guys as of now that we can pencil in as being starters on the Michigan football team if it does occur this spring.
Yeah, and those two are interesting because they're guys that probably won't get picked in the NFL draft in April. And I think if there's a spring season, we could see that draft move back. But as of now, the NFL draft in April. So they do kind of need a spring. They need some more film of them out there to get in the hands of NFL scouts and front offices. So they'd be open to it. When you look at some other guys, Aiden Hutchinson yesterday was on Marty Smith from ESPN's podcast, Marty Smith's America, and he was frustrated. He was infuriated, he said, but when the topic of the spring season did come up, he sounded a little more open to it, saying that he was hopeful yesterday before Kevin Warren's letter that the fall season gets reversed. Then he said, we'll see what happens with the spring. He's going to hang around. But he's eligible for the draft. He's a guy that could bolt, just like we saw with Jalen Mayfield, who decided to head to the NFL. Can't blame the kid. Projected first-round NFL draft pick by some. I think that was predicated largely on possibly impressing even more in his redshirt sophomore season, but doesn't look like that's going to happen. And he is off to the NFL, off preparing for a pro career. So you can't blame a kid like that. But I think it gets a little more interesting with who would play when you look at some of those juniors that would get drafted in the NFL, like Aiden Hutchinson. I know Jalen Mayfield's already gone, like I said, but I think it's more feasible than you think as well. And if you add that aspect in, like you mentioned, of moving back the fall 2021 season, then you're talking a lot more doable because you spread those months out and you add in the factor that Jeff Brom, Purdue's head coach, pointed out that they haven't played this fall. So if you look at the calendar year from last March to the next March, it'll be, a similar amount of actual padded practices and padded games where you're actually in live action. And then from that March to the March after, if you do shorten the next season up, then it's going to be a similar amount of padded practices and live action in games. So there's a lot to work out. I hope that they're doing this behind the scenes and they don't wait until the last second and then pull the plug on this. And I mean, Penn State's AD saying a schedule could be released within a week or so. I don't necessarily believe that, but it's a good sign towards, for the people that want football and the people that want more football. Like Jim Harbaugh says, more is more. More football is more for me. I want it. I know you want it as well. So hearing that is good stuff. But let's get back to Jalen Mayfield. Your thoughts on him heading out to the NFL? We didn't get to see a whole lot of him. He was very, very good last year and solid and had a ton of upside. I just wish we could have seen him at his best in college as an upperclassman. But at the same time, I understand the decision and support it completely because these are unprecedented times and everyone's got to look out for themselves at this point. But your thoughts on Jalen Mayfield heading out to the NFL draft?
Yeah, like you said, it's hard to blame the kid one bit, especially in these uncertain times and the fact that he doesn't know when he or his teammates will be allowed to play football ever again. We barely knew the kid. I think he appeared in 16 games at Michigan, 13 this past year as a redshirt freshman, and I think 3 as a freshman in 2018. So it felt like he just got here, and yet he's gone already. We knew this was a possibility, so it really didn't catch us off guard. We had built relationships with parts of his family, his dad especially, over these past few years and during the recruiting process. So, again, it was not caught off guard. I think the Michigan coaching staff really realized this was a possibility as well. I think that it started picking up steam a few months ago when Mel Kiper of ESPN projected him as one of the top 20 picks or so in the 2021 NFL draft. And I think that helped really put him on the radar from a national perspective. Rivals.com's Mike Farrell and Adam Gorney wrote an article about him today debating whether or not he will be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. And Mike Farrell said no, but Adam Gorney said yes. He said this kid will absolutely be a first-round pick come next year. So even though he only has 13 starts under his belt, the potential is through the roof. And this kid has the body type and the makeup to be a prototypical longtime starter in the NFL at right tackle. And obviously, we wish him nothing but the best moving forward. But it's just a shame that it had to come down to this, and you really can't blame him when considering he doesn't know when he'll ever see the field again in college, or even if he ever would have over the next year or so.
Yeah, and then a couple other guys that would be people with decisions to make would be Kwity Paye, the senior defensive end, Ambry Thomas at corner. There's kind of some rumblings about both of them possibly moving on and not waiting to see if there's a spring season, getting ready for that NFL draft now. And it sounds like it's going to get passed where you get an extra year of eligibility. And it seems like it's going to be a free year for anyone, including teams in the SEC that play in the fall. So it'd be just an absolute free year, and you'd get 6 years of eligibility if you participated in the 2020/2021, if you count that as the spring season. So, guys could come back if you're Ambry Thomas, Kwity Paye, but these are guys that are going to get drafted in the NFL draft. Kwity Paye higher than Ambry Thomas, but these are guys that were planning on moving on after their senior season, and you don't blame them one bit for leaving either. And I think both of those guys are going to get picked, and both those guys will have pretty darn good NFL careers because they're great athletes. And, again, you wish you could have seen them one last time at their best as a senior in college where you're leading a team. You're as good as you're going to be in college because it's your last season. It's just a shame that we're not able to see that. It's sad for them, guys that came back and wanted to do that, but it makes sense. And we'll keep an eye on those two going forward as they have to make some decisions here, probably even before any announcement on a spring season happens, because again, a spring season, the spring is when you get ready for the NFL combine and you get ready to impress scouts in private workouts and things like that. You don't go to class in the spring when you're heading to the NFL. So it would kind of throw a wrench in their whole plan. So I wouldn't blame them one bit to enter the draft and get ready right away.
No, I really wouldn't blame them either. I think it's worth pointing out that Mayfield is the only one who has made a decision publicly on his future, so we don't know for a fact whether or not guys like Nico Collins and Ambry Thomas and Kwity Paye will leave or come back, but I do think that all three of the guys I just mentioned will be gone, and it's hard to blame them because they'll all likely be NFL draft picks. I think Ambry Thomas's situation especially is quite unique when considering that he did have colitis prior to last year, and I think that could potentially be a health risk for him if he were to stick around and play football at Michigan again. Whether or not that's the case, I don't think is known outside of his inner circle. But you and I both wrote articles on the Wolverine.com over the past week about guys who this impacts most this fall season being canceled. And we threw out names like senior safety Brad Hawkins and fifth-year senior running back Chris Evans, guys who were going to be fringe NFL draft picks, Nick Eubanks and Carlo Kemp also, and this really hurts them, and it's easy to see why they would come back to boost their NFL draft stock. Chris Evans especially is in a very odd position when considering he was suspended all of last year and hasn't seen live college football game action since 2018, so it makes all the sense in the world for him to come back, get some more game film under his belt, and for him to raise his NFL draft stock for these NFL teams. So in my opinion, the Big Ten needs to make decisions ASAP regarding this spring season and whether or not they're going to have it and just what their plans are as a whole moving forward, because these college athletes are in limbo right now and they really can't make any or have any concrete evidence to use when making their decisions for the future. So it's about time Kevin Warren and the Big Ten offices step up and really accelerate their decision-making process. But as we've seen from Kevin Warren over the past few weeks, I think that's asking too much for him.
Yeah, and it is interesting when you bring up guys like a Brad Hawkins or the two guys we talked about earlier with Carlo Kemp and Nick Eubanks that we were able to be on a conference call with yesterday. If this is let's say they play a spring season and it's a free year of eligibility, we could see them back again. I think Nick Eubanks and Carlo Kemp will probably do enough to want to take their shot at the NFL, but maybe a guy like Brad Hawkins, who isn't a fifth-year senior and would get that free year, then get to play 5 years. We could see these guys for another year. That's the only positive out of this. It sucks that we're not going to be able to see guys like Kwity Paye and Ambry Thomas likely ever again in a Michigan uniform. You wouldn't think, and Nico Collins as well. they have their own decisions to make. We don't know exactly what they're going to do at this point, but there's certainly the best guess would be to say that, we're not going to see these guys again in a Michigan uniform. At the same time, you could see like a fifth-year Brad Hawkins next year after playing a spring season or not, but you could still see him back. So there's some positives that come out of this in terms of just, who could possibly be on that roster, because you're going to have some holes to fill, and if guys don't have a season between now and then, you're going to have a lot more inexperience than you were projected to have. So, what do you think about maybe having that free year and some guys sticking around for a fifth or sixth year that you never really thought that was possible before?
It's definitely intriguing to think about because it could really boost that Michigan roster come fall of 2021 or the following year if you do have veteran guys who have started a lot of games in their careers back for a year that you didn't expect them to have. I think it's way too early to project who might still be around come that time and who might not be, because so much can and will change between now and then. But for Jim Harbaugh and this coaching staff, again, it's exciting to think about if you have a lot of key veterans back for another year that you didn't expect to have.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's Michigan football. We'll keep an eye on those decisions. Those are really the big storylines as we head now an inch closer and closer to September as college football begins, but not in the Big Ten. All eyes are on the likes of Nico Collins, Ambry Thomas, Kwity Paye. We will keep an eye on them and what they're doing. Again, a lot of rumblings around them. Kwity Paye still working out with the team. I know the team is working out right now and preparing for a combine in October that they're going to put on for NFL scouts, and leave it to Jim Harbaugh, to get innovative with what they're going to do without a season. They're going to showcase all of their guys at the Big House in October, Austin. How about that? Aiden Hutchinson revealed that yesterday on Marty Smith's podcast.
Yeah, props to Jim Harbaugh for doing something like this. I think that he's shown ever since he's been here at Michigan that he is innovative and creative and isn't afraid to do things that other coaches around the country won't do, and he's all about his players. So this obviously helps out his players in a big way when it comes to gaining them attention for the NFL draft. So I think it's a great idea, and a lot of good will come from it. And again, I think Jim Harbaugh deserves all the credit in the world for the ideas he's come up with over these past 5 years at Michigan.
Yep. Let's move on to some hoops recruiting. But before we do so, we'll talk to you guys about JFQ Lending. This podcast is brought to you by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there's never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you're guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Josh Yoder a call at 480-378-0498 or email Josh directly at jyoder@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending Incorporated, equal access lender, licensed in over 40 states. www.jfqlending.com. So, Austin, on the recruiting trail, Juwan Howard in the 2021 class has landed his fourth commitment, and this class is coming together quite nicely. 3 4-stars now, 1 3-star, and Will Cheddar, who's really on the verge of being a 4-star as well. He's in that Rivals 150. And, man, Frankie Collins, you watch this kid's tape. He's a 4-star point guard, 6'1", 175-pound out of Henderson, Nevada, number 69 player in the country per Rivals.com. But, man, you watch his tape. He's a freak athlete. He's dunking over guys bigger than him. Super good handles, good with the ball, strong at the rim. Again, high-flying, dynamic athlete. I'm excited about watching this kid and see how he develops going into Michigan in the fall of 2021. But down the road, I mean, you like the prospects of Frankie Collins. And Chris Ballas was talking with Eric Bossy at Rivals.com, I think last week, talking about what the impact of possibly landing Frankie Collins would be. This is before he announced last night on Wednesday night. And he was like, man, getting a top 100 guy at the point guard spot in this year's class, which is the weakest point guard class he's seen in 20 years covering the sport, that's a coup. So getting a guy like Frankie Collins cannot be understated. The importance of grabbing that point guard for 2021, because you really do need a lead guard the situation there a little bit murky at Michigan, but it's looking better and better now with Frankie Collins in the fold.
Yeah, we knew that Jalen Warley had been arguably Juwan Howard's top target at point guard in this recruiting cycle, and he committed to Florida State about a week and a half ago. So getting Frankie Collins as a bit of a consolation prize isn't a bad backup option at all, though. He's rated as the 12th best point guard in the country, and even though he's only 6'1", he's an outstanding athlete and a heck of a dunker. Chris Ballas described his overall game style as playing above the rim. So that's not something you see very often from guys who are only 6'1", and I think it's worth pointing out what Juwan Howard's recruiting class is turning into now. It's rated as the number 5 overall class in the country, and Florida State and Villanova are the only 2 schools in the entire nation who have more 4-stars in their class than Michigan does. Michigan now has 3, and the 2 schools I just mentioned both have 4, and the Big Ten overall is really dominating this 2021 recruiting cycle. 3 Big Ten teams now rank in the top 8 in the national standings, MSU at number 4, Michigan at number 5, and Ohio State at number 8. Back to Frankie Collins, we talked about him before this podcast, and even though his shooting numbers were not very good last year, I think it's worth pointing out that I spoke with a Luke Pohl, who coached a high school team to the Palama Westphalia Pirates to a high school state title 2 years ago, and he said that this kid, even though his shooting numbers weren't very good, he said he's got a heck of a stroke, and he thinks that Frankie Collins can turn into a really good shooter down the road. So even though his numbers on the circuit last year weren't very good, I think that it's a realistic possibility that he at least turns into a decent shooter. So again, this kid is a top 70 prospect. It's a heck of a pickup for Juwan Howard, and they're now sitting at 4 commits, and the plan has been all along to take 6 guys. So I think there's a really decent chance that they hold out a bit on these final 2 spots and really put all their eggs into one basket in terms of some of these 5-stars they're after. They're still in on 2 or 3 several outstanding prospects, and I would not be surprised to see this Michigan recruiting class finish out and for Juwan Howard to land 1 or 2 of these 5-stars that he's still waiting on.
Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility. I think you look at Efton Reed, the center from IMG Academy, as a top target right now, and then you go with the best available type of prospect. You do need a big guy in this class. You need guys down there. Really the emphasis coming in was you need a point guard, you need a center. They didn't get those right away. They got Kobe Buffkin, a shooting guard, Isaiah Barnes, more of a 3 type guy, and then Will Cheddar, a 4. So you filled in the middle there, but you needed your point guard. You got Frankie Collins. I think Efton Reed would be a very good center option, a 4-star out of IMG. And then you go after the big fish, and you chase those until the end, like they usually go. Trevor Keels is a 5-star that they're going after. Harrison Ingram, another guy. And Hunter Dickinson had a message for Trevor Keels last night after Frankie Collins committed on his Instagram story and said, "At Trevor Keels, you're next." So, they're going after those types of guys. So you do have the luxury now of having most of this class, which is a big class, locked up before you really have to go in at the end and go all in, push your chips in the middle for some of these bigger 5-star type of targets. I did want to go back to Frankie Collins real quick in terms of him as a shooter. I was talking to his high school coach, Jeff Kaufman, yesterday, and I brought up the fact that, he was 6 for 21 last year in AAU from 3. People don't think he's much of a shooter. Asked him basically, what are your thoughts on that? He said, well, people like to talk about how he's not much of a shooter because he can do so many other things, but when he is open, he knocks down his shots. It's something he's been working on as well throughout the summer. He's been finding pickup games. He's been going around, basically walking around willing to play whoever out there in Nevada, and he has a garage set up in his gym, or he has a gym set up in his garage. So that would be a little different if he had a garage set up in his gym, but he's got a gym set up in his garage, and he's been lifting and things like that. He's a strong, thicker guy for a point guard who's 6'1", 175, in very well built for his size. But basically, he's been working on all aspects of his game throughout the offseason, including that shooting, which doesn't need to be as improved as a lot of people think. At least that's what his high school coach said, and he seemed very adamant about that. So it's better news on that front in terms of having a point guard that can shoot. But we were talking about before the show how about half of Michigan's point guards in the last 10, 12 years could shoot the ball, and they've all been super effective. when you look back to Darius Morris at the beginning of the Beeline days, he wasn't a shooter. When you look at Trey Burke and then Derek Walton, both of those guys absolutely were. And then Xavier Simpson, famously not a shooter, right? I mean, he did develop his shot quite a bit to where he was making open looks as a senior and as a junior, but it's not a prerequisite as a point guard, and we've seen that at Michigan, to be an elite three-point shooter. It's just not. So I think you can win with Frankie Collins. And again, his coach pointed out the million other things he does well, including shooting, but he pointed out that he just does so much well that it's really not going to be an issue at all.
Yeah, and you just talked about the past point guards that Michigan has had under John Beilein. I think it's safe to say that they had two of each. You mentioned Morris and Simpson as the non-shooters, and then Burke and Walton as the guy who were excellent shooters. And look at the success that Michigan had with all four guys under Darius Morris. They won a Big Ten title, and they really turned the corner in 2011, and that's kind of when they jumped onto the national scene and made the NCAA tournament. And then under Xavier Simpson in 2018, they obviously went to the national title. And then you look at what they did under Burke and Walton, Burke leading the team to a national title in 2013, and then Derek Walton having all the success that he had as Michigan's starting point guard, winning the Big Ten title in 2014 and making the run to the Sweet 16 and the Big Ten tournament title as a senior in 2017. So it's obvious that you can win with both. I think that it's nice to have the shooting aspect from your point guard spot, but at the same time, John Beilein proved that you can win at a high level if your point guard isn't an excellent shooter, and I think we're going to see a similar trend with that under Juwan Howard moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt. So Frankie Collins, one to be excited about. I know the fan base is excited, and before I hung up with his coach, Jeff Kaufman, he said, man, I just hope, he's like, Frankie's a great kid. I just hope that the Michigan family, the Michigan community, takes him in, takes care of him, and supports him. And I said, you don't have anything to worry about there. Just knowing Michigan fans and being around Michigan my entire life, they're already excited about this kid on a personal level, but they take care of their own. And I think he was assured to hear that. So congratulations to Frankie Collins on the commitment. Michigan really moving along here in the class of 2021. So it's good to see if you're a Michigan fan on the recruiting trail. And again, recruiting is really the only thing going on right now. These Michigan guys working out, getting ready for what could possibly be a season starting in November as scheduled now, but we will see on that. That is our show for this week. Just a reminder once again to head to thewolverine.com, use promo code BLUE60. You get 60 days of our premium content for free. Rate us 5 stars, subscribe on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you listen on. Follow us on Twitter at The Wolverine Mag. Like us on Facebook at The Wolverine Magazine. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Wolverine Video. That is our show. We'll talk to everybody next week.